All right, we're on. Welcome, everyone. I'm Macy. I'm your moderator and the host for this free live streaming is Ben Crossdale from England. Which area of England are you from, Ben?
I'm in the Midlands, so right in the middle of the country near Nottingham. So away from the coast, luckily, from all the weather we've been having.
Yeah. Well, thank you for spending your evening with us here. The topic today is autism myth. So my goal for this session is to hopefully be able to answer some parents' questions, parents of young kids waiting for diagnosis, some kind of diagnosis, and just parents of young kids in general, neurodiverse young kids. And it'll be great for people to be able to ask you questions later. So why don't we do an introduction of you? Can you tell us more about yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm Ben. I'm an autistic adult. I am 26 and was diagnosed with autism along with a lot of other mental health issues at the age of 10. I struggled a lot through school with my autism and then became more interested in autism and started to try and explore coping mechanisms for myself. Therefore, went down the YouTube channel to try and express myself and feel like I've become a better person because of it, just because now I know I'm helping people and I really enjoy it. So that's a little bit on me.
That's great. All right, so we're just gonna get started. I'm gonna do screen share and I'm gonna show you the important points that I think would be relevant to parents. So just hang on one second here. Share my screen. All right, here we go. All right, so these are questions that parents often hear from professionals, from their pediatricians. So let's do our best to debunk the myths of autism and what people tell parents and give your take as an autistic person living with autism, Ben.
Yep.
So the first one is parents are often told that autism is a behavioral disorder. So the behaviors is what we want to fix. So as a parent of a neurodiverse and also a professional working as a parent coach for 30 years, I know that fixing what we see from the outside, fixing the behaviors, it's not really helpful. So you grew up probably experiencing, how people look at you because you have maybe some behavioral challenges. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you take us back to you growing up with autistic related behaviors and how that being looked at as a kid with a lot of behavioral issues was difficult, I'm sure.
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I always felt like before I knew I had autism, I was trying to fit in, and fitting in wasn't difficult. I tried to be something I wasn't, and by doing that, I then became almost like a lost soul in myself because being something you're not and trying to be somebody you're not is unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
The way I see autism is as long as you're not endangering yourself through the autism, and as long as you're happy, so if your child has autism and is happy and seems happy in themselves, why would you change anything about them? Why would you try and change traits of that they've got? Now, guidance towards traits is brilliant because obviously it helps them cope with the real world and cope with just life in general. But there's certain paths and certain amounts of pressure you can put in one direction to try and guide somebody before they will reject it. And then, so when I was at school, I got pushed and pushed and pushed to try and fit in, and I crashed. I just broke down. I couldn't deal with it. I also was very good at masking, and that's another topic, but I could hide anything from people, so people wouldn't know I was autistic. They would ask me and they'd go, "You don't look autistic." I was like, "Well, yeah, that's because I'm not letting you see it." But it's so basically, I just think that if somebody's not hurting themselves and they're safe in themselves, then leave their autism be. And if they are hurting themselves, then obviously as a parent they're going to worry, they're going to step in. That's completely understandable. But just try and let them be themselves. I'm going around in circles a little bit, but it's, yeah, you get the idea. It's just it's
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
not to intervene too much.
yeah. So let's do this maybe potentially fun activity. So we talk about behaviors, which are actions that people can see with our eyes, right?
Mhm.
But let's share with parents, instead of focusing on what our eyes can see, let's think about the whys, what's going on underneath. So one example that came to my mind, the first month of being in kindergarten for my kid, he had a lot of autistic-like behaviors, like clapping and jumping 3 times, and then it starts again for the entire month. So that's what I saw. So what would you say was happening actually? Why do you think he did that?
Expression for a start, excitement. It might be just excitement, but not know how to verbally transition it into what we would say. If it was me, I was verbal when I was younger, so I could have said it, but I would have probably still had the actions to go with it. Whereas if you've got a non-verbal child or very limited talking, then all of it comes down to actions, and you have to learn to read your child as best you can to know that those actions are happy actions, or you could have sad actions. So yeah, it's stimming, but it's slightly different stimming because they are actually trying to show their emotions. Whereas some stimming is just like involuntary movement, whether it's boredom or whether it's stress. Is just so it's a big complex of things. But in that situation, what you just said to me, from just hearing it, sounds like excitement as well as probably a little bit of nerves to be experiencing something new and trying to work it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a really good explanation. So, and let's think of another example of a behavior. So what about that fight and flight response? So that's a behavior, right? Like
Yeah.
a teacher asks you time to do this math sheet, and you just whatever, rip the paper or just not respond at all. So that's the behavior. So what do you think is actually going on underneath?
So with that, that's happened to me a lot, and a lot of the time now I would think to take a deep breath before something escalates, but it's a case of fear kicking in before brain power. And if your brain kicks in before your fear, you can control it, but as soon as the fear gets ahead, it's extremely hard to overcome and bring back behind the fear. So if it's a young child in that situation, that is going to be extremely difficult to educate and try and help them understand that they need to try and think before they react, or like you said, tear something up or throw something or whatever it is. But I think the earlier the age that you start trying to educate that kind of system is very good, because then they'll grow up. Because I was so happy that when I grew up, I was learning my autism all the way through. And some people who get diagnosed later on really, really struggle and then realize why they were struggling. But at that point, it doesn't matter because they've struggled the whole life anyway. And that's another reason why I always tell parents or younger autistic people who are considering they might be autistic or wanting to get a diagnosis to get diagnosed earlier, because then you know yourself.
Yeah, so so it's a reaction. It's a quick reaction of somebody, and it could be at any age, somebody who doesn't know how to anticipate and prepare oneself to that unpredictability. And that's why it's that fight or flight, is what, the public parents always feel embarrassed, oh my gosh, it's so hard to take my kids anywhere because, he runs away or have meltdowns, or just fight with you all the time, and that's so embarrassing. So you just explained very nicely what's going on underneath. So for parents to actually maybe prepare, whether it's using photos, just slow things down, and don't rush as much as possible. I think that might be helpful. And also maybe practice when, if it's going to public places, maybe practicing when it's not a busy time, like weekends will be so busy, but I do feel that we do have to expose our kids to public places and more challenging situations because they do need to learn the coping strategies to be in those kind of environments. Um,
I think the worst thing you can do is bubble wrap your child. You do have to protect them. They are vulnerable children at the end of the day, but there's still safe, like you said, safe environments and safe situations you can put them in and let them cope on their own. So, like you said, a less busy shopping centre would be a perfect environment because you could just step back a little bit and watch them, knowing they're in a safe environment. But for instance, taking them out in the dark in a town at night wouldn't be suitable.
Yeah.
So it's a judgment from the parent, and then obviously the child just needs to buckle in and try and cope with it as best they can.
Right. Right. So let's save the self-stimming point to later. Hopefully we'll have some people later. But so let's talk about eye contact. That's a big one. That's a big one. I really hate that word, eye contact. Eye contact. That's really, if somebody tells you, "Look at me," and that person responds, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just a response to a command, right? How do you explain, from the perspective of an autistic person, about your use of eye gaze? So tell us why it's hard and what's different about it, when a neurotypical look at each other versus an autistic person, trying to engage in social situations. So go ahead.
So with eye contact, it is extremely difficult for somebody with autism. I used to not look at people at all, and the reason I didn't feel I could was because I felt I was being judged, and felt that people would I always never knew when to blink. How many times should you blink when you're looking at somebody? If you blink too much, does it look odd? If you don't blink at all, are you staring? And things like that. Now, with somebody with autism, if you're trying to get their attention for a start, always use their name. Using their name will get their attention, and equally, how you speak to them and the tone that you speak to them in when you say "look at me" or "make eye contact" is a starting point, and it's also an ending point, because if you say it in the wrong way, they will not listen. If you say it in a stressed way, slightly angry, frustrated, anything like that, you'll scare them. And when I was growing up, if somebody said "look at me" or "make eye contact" and they said it in the wrong way, I just shut down. I felt intimidated because it wasn't pleasant to be told that you had to stare or had to look at somebody when you didn't want to and you weren't in control of it. And it is scary, it really is. Like, I still now, I can make eye contact now a lot easier, but that took years and years of struggling to get to the point that I'm at now. But if you do it in stages, make sure you start with the name, make sure you say it in a nice, calm voice, and maybe do tell them if they are staring, so they understand a little bit that you should maybe look away every so often or blink or whatever. That will help as well.
Mm-hmm. So from a neurotypical perspective, I think just in general, as human beings, when you're feeling nervous or uncertain, it's not a situation where you want to look at, your partner. If you get caught like stealing a cookie from the cookie jar, you're not gonna look at your mom. You're gonna do all you can to look away, So, or when you're just nervous, like maybe you're in an interview and you're feeling nervous, you're not gonna use your eye contact. So when you think about it, the eye gaze aversion, actually looking away, it's a very natural part of human interactions. So people forget about that because everybody's hyper focuses on eye contact. So I want to send a message to parents of young children is not to get stuck on the eye contact, and don't do anything like drilling for eye contact. It's not really useful because people look at each other because we have a reason to look at each other, because we want to share something or we want to get feedback or input. Is this a good thing? Am I doing well? Are you with me? They're thinking behind it. So it's very unnatural to expect somebody to look at you when there's no reason for that person to actually look at you. So
maybe in that aspect of not trying to try and educate your child to look so much, actually look what they're looking at and take into account that there is something in particular that they are looking at. You might actually learn a little bit more about them just by seeing, are they looking at the window, are they looking at the birds, are they looking at cars going by, and those kind of things. For instance, I could immediately go, if they're looking at birds relaxing, bird songs, bird tunes might settle them at night time, and just you can just take it off onto another path. Then just look at what they're doing and read them for what they're doing, not try and make them be something that they're not being, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but you gave a really, really nice tip. Look together. So instead of face to face, look out together or look at something together. I think that's really beautiful. So I think everyone should start there. You just share a common interest, and maybe you can have ideas that you want to share, and maybe sharing through your use of eye gaze would happen. So in relation to maybe eye gaze, let's talk about social skills. So I'm sure that's another one people ask you. So parents ask me frequently, so I'm worried that my child is not going to have any friends. I really want him to have friends and, be able to play with other kids. So what do you think about that? How do you explain to parents that autistic people and their motivation to connect with others and the way they express that I like you or let's hang out together, that's different than how a neurotypical would do it?
So with friends and socializing, I would first start off by saying, don't force it. If you try and force it, it won't happen. Autistic people will do whatever they want in their own time. And if there's any pressure behind it, you may as well just stop, because they'll just turn away as normal with anything else. I would also say maybe there's a lot of autism groups going around now, like socializing. So it's like a youth club, but it's to me, it's a safer youth club because it's only for people with autism. Now, that's not to say that's always a good idea to just isolate them into a group full of autistic people, because then they're not socializing with people that haven't got autism. But if you can get them into a group like that, that's a starting point. And then if they enjoy it, maybe let them go to a normal youth club or something that has adult children with autism and not autism, because they need a mixture. You can't just restrict people to be a club of disabilities, because that's not the world. The world isn't just disabilities. There's everyone else in it.
Yeah. And again, for parents to remember that our children are born with different kinds of personalities. And I know that my husband was very shy when he was a little boy. I don't think my kid would grow up to be a party animal. That's just not him. So it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. It's just there is that you're born with, you can grow up to be a little bit more social, but I think it's okay to just let them be social in their own terms.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, to nurture friendships at their own time in their own ways. That's really, really important.